Drew gets to the cave and has brought Rick along with her. Isn't that cool? Hello there, heroes. I'm the Orange Ranger, and welcome to another Tattooed Teenage Alien Fighters from Beverly Hills episode review. We all know that this show was a quick ripoff, trying to capitalize on the success of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. However, sometimes the thing being ripped off will take ideas from their imitators. Think changes the NFL made after the XFL showed up. But I mean, that didn't happen here, right? Power Rangers never took one single idea from this little cheap knockoff show. Did they? Well, let's take a look at the 16th episode, The Universal Hitchhiker, and see if this suddenly becomes relevant. But quickly, heroes, before we get started, I'd really appreciate it if you would click that thumbs up button right down below to like the video. When the video's over, make sure you go back down to the comments and let me know what you thought of this episode as well as my review of it. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel to see all of my videos. Ring the bell, get those notifications set up, and I would love it if you would consider supporting the channel financially on either Patreon or Ko-fi. Alright, on to the review. The episode starts at Disney World. Just kidding. On Molecula, Lechner's scratching is annoying Gorganis, who has an itch of his own. To conquer Earth. He asks about the status of Predaraptor. Lechner says Predaraptor recently destroyed a planet and then went into hibernation on his homeworld. Gorganis says his vacation is over and summons him out of the little action figure box. So was he on his homeworld or in the box?
Get your story straight.
I mentioned at the end of last week's review that Predaraptor sounded like a brand new monster for the series, and indeed it is. But oh, heroes, take yourself a gander at this thing. This is a Halloween costume. Heck, Ranger Liz's T-Rex suit is more convincing than this. Its head doesn't even move. Yikes. Interesting little change here as the Sentinels immediately show up, no scene in the cave. We then get nearly 20 seconds of the Sentinels jumping, leaping, and posing. Listen, I get that they're parodying Power Rangers, but just because you're parodying something doesn't mean it's not stupid when you do it. The Sentinels zap Predaraptor with their weapons to no effect and then get zapped themselves. Predaraptor goes to grab Centaur, but then suddenly portals away. The Sentinels return to Nimbar, who says that Predaraptors, yes, plural, he talks about them like a species, can be very difficult to defeat. Lori says from what she remembers, they're practically invulnerable. Oh yeah, heroes, it's time for this again. Gordon says it would be a lot easier if they could just destroy it. This time. Listen, I'm not even sure that this is something I can complain about anymore. After the double dose of the Sorcerer in back-to-back episodes, I've basically lost confidence that even the episodes on the DVD are listed in the proper order. I mean, this show changed hands twice before DHX put this DVD together, so who's to say they even knew the right order of the episodes? It's a little frustrating, but all this confusion about whether monsters have been here before or not could just be a symptom of the episodes being in the wrong order. I just really wish that I had production numbers. Anyway, Swinton asks if destroying Predaraptor is even possible, and Nimbar is weirdly vague about this, only saying not in so many words. Drew has a somewhat confusing response to that, acting like Nimbar is withholding information from the team when really just nobody asked him to clarify. She's tired of just going along with whatever Nimbar says without having all the information, and she runs off. Nimbar letting her run off using a portal. Time for even more vagueness from Nimbar. The others say that it's just Drew being Drew, but Nimbar says he's seen this kind of darkness before, and it cost the lives of 3 Sentinels on another team. The 4th Sentinel suffered an even worse fate. He survived. The randomness ain't stopping here, folks. The other Sentinels follow Drew back to the cafe, where she's sitting at the bar with something to drink. I thought it was coffee, but I'll touch on that in a second. So she's been there for at least a couple of minutes, right? Enough time to grab a cup, get something to drink, and sit down. Why didn't the Sentinels follow her right away? Anyway, they ask her what's wrong, but she won't answer them. Then some guy walks through their portal.
Excuse me, did you just say?
Yeah, handsome dude over here just followed them out of the portal and kind of owns the space, drinking Drew's drink. This is when I realized a drop of it lands on his chin and it's clearly water. I thought it was coffee, but maybe she was just drinking water out of a coffee cup. I don't know, whatever. And he calls Earth a place with bad music and pretty girls.
Earth girls are easy.
Drew is immediately taken with him, but the other Sentinels are of course very confused. He asks Drew's name and says that his own would sound like wombats gargling razor blades in our language, so to just call him Rick. He finally explains how he got there. He is an episode title, a universal hitchhiker. Matter is passing back and forth through the portal network all the time, so he just grabs onto some. The transporter pays for an extra 75 kilos, about 165 pounds, without even realizing that they've done so. Do Nimbar and Gorganis pay to use the portal network? And he goes wherever he feels like. He's basically an intergalactic train hobo. Lori grabs his arm, presumably similar to Ashley poking Andros on In Space to see if he feels human, and I'm going to do the show a little solid here. Let's just say that his tattoo resonates with Lori's, revealing the fact that he's a galactic sentinel. Otherwise, what? Is Nimbar trying to contact him despite not knowing he's around? Or, as he says, he was. Drew agrees to let Rick crash with her that night, though he gets to sleep outside on the pool deck. Rick starts trash-talking Nimbar, basically saying he's manipulative and scheming, tricking young people on planet after planet into fighting his battles. Drew defends Nimbar a little, but when Rick says that trust only extends as far as your own skin, she's forced to agree. She asks what happened to him, and he takes her hand and places it on his forehead. She's scared at first, but he says it's not going to hurt, and ironically asks her to trust him. She even repeats it, "Trust you?" seemingly pointing out that irony, but she does it anyway, and she and the audience get to see Rick's memories. He stands on a desolate battlefield, calling out to his fellow Sentinels, Leo, Ursa, and Franco? Leo and Ursa are constellations, but I couldn't find a constellation for Franco. Funny enough, that makes their team very similar to this team, as this team has two that are named after constellations, Scorpio and Taurus, but then two that are not named for their constellations, Centaur and Apollo.
Get on with it!
Okay, I guess I earned that one. Predaraptor finds him and attacks, soon knocking him down. He screams for Nimbar as the monster approaches, but it just fades to black. Back at Drew's, it turns out that Rick lied. Drew did feel the pain that Rick felt. He says the whole universe is lies and pain. Cheer up, emo kid! Cheer up, emo kid! You'll be okay! Drew asks about pleasure. Okay, but Rick says that all pleasure is now is the absence of pain. She asks what happened to Leo and Draco and Ursa. Oh, it was Draco, not Franco. Draco is a constellation. So, minor spoilers here, it turns out their entire team was named after constellations, unlike this team. Anyway, he says they're all gone, his planet is gone, he doesn't even know how he survived. Drew says that Nimbar told them that sometimes Predaraptor just stops attacking. Must have been that other time that they fought Predaraptor. Oh, wait. But Rick doesn't care at all about what Nimbar has to say. He says that Nimbar is going to abandon them just like him. She says that she has to get back. Get back where? Inside the house? Anyway, she asks what he'll do next, and he says that he'll hop another portal and keep on looking for that special someone who will be a whole bunch of contradictions, but basically a go anywhere, do anything, no obligations in life kind of girl. Drew is clearly tempted to be this girl, but then her tattoo flashes. He tells her to forget the tattoo and come with him. It's just like an itch, weirdly tying back to the beginning of the episode actually, and it eventually goes away. She says it really doesn't because his tattoo is also flashing. The other Sentinels get back to Nimbar's cave, and of course, Predaraptor is back. Nimbar asks where Drew is, and Gordon very nonchalantly says that Drew is with a former Sentinel named Rick. Nimbar drops Nick's Sentinel name, and it's Orion. I'm going to touch on that later because right now there's no time. To wait for Drew, that is, so Nimbar tells them to get out there and just look for a weak point. Minor transformation note, because these are the kinds of things I point out. 4 notes play when the Sentinels transform, 1 for each, and Drew's note plays despite her not being there. The Sentinels arrive and start fighting Predaraptor. Meanwhile, Drew gets to the cave and has brought Rick along with her. Nimbar insists that he didn't abandon Rick, whose real name he actually says. I don't know if I'd rate it Wombat's Gargling Razor Blades. Looking for Rick right up until Gorganis nuked the planetary core, Rick finishes. Now that is the Gorganis that I want. That's a real villain. Rick says he's not going to let Drew share his fate, and the two of them are leaving. Nimbar tells Drew that the other Sentinels need her help, and she's been staring at a screen watching them fight the whole time. But she says nobody really needs anybody in this life, so the 3 of them will be able to get on just fine without her. Nimbar chides Rick for feeding her lies about easy escapes, and now she's disillusioned. Nimbar, Drew has always been disillusioned. That's her character. Rick counters that Nimbar doesn't even respect his Sentinels enough to give them all the information they need. This is kind of true, and it's never touched on again. Drew says that she's made a decision. However, that decision is that she's going to help her friends. She steps onto her platform, and she gets the single note that they couldn't cut out of the other 3's transformation. Predaraptor has gotten the upper hand. Claw. Anyway, weird sequence of all 3 of the Sentinels being in the same position that Orion was, knocked down and helpless, but they cut to the monster between each one. So it's like Predaraptor was bending down to get Scorpio, but suddenly stood back up and turned and bent down to get Taurus, etc., etc. Anyway, Centaur beams in and zaps the monster, saving them. Scorpio calls for Nitron, but then she is immediately directly zapped. Centaur also gets zapped. Rick says that Nimbar needs to bring them back right now, revealing that he does care. Drew is okay, but Lori is suffering from auditory overload. Earlier in the episode, Nimbar mentioned blocking Predaraptor's sonic frequency, but absolutely nothing in the footage suggests that Predaraptor uses sonic weapons, so I didn't mention it. Anyway, that kind of eliminates the possibility of Nitron since they're not going to have Scorpio, and Nimbar says that Nitron will be necessary to winning this battle. Swinton suggests that the monster's weak point might be the glowing spot on its forehead before every attack, but Rick says no. His team tried attacking that spot, and it dissolved their version of Nitron. Instead, they have to attack a spot on the back of the monster's head where its spine just so happens to be exposed for some reason. Gordon says they have no reason to listen to him. He's a loser that got his entire team wiped out. Of course, Gordon has absolutely no way of knowing that. Nimbar could have told them the story about Rick before they went after Drew, hence that delay, but then they shouldn't have been surprised about who Rick turned out to be. Rick says that Drew should make the call, and she chooses to trust Rick. For the one hand, he's still around, he could have left at any time, and on the other, eventually you do have to choose to believe in something. By the by, their plan is to have Orion come into battle with them, and then to form Nitron. They check that this will quickly work, that their teams are compatible. The old team, Orion's team, formed Nitron by forming the arm square, and this team transforms by calling their names on the discs, so it all works the same. Hearing another Sentinel transform with the team was just so weird, but in a very cool way. Orion basically wears a silver copy of Taurus's uniform. Orion wears silver. Centaur calls for Nitron, and the sequence forming it is actually pretty neat as we get a close-up of Centaur's face, and then Orion looking at her as he calls out. But then...
Get on!
Nimbar.
Get up!
They use the stock Nitron formation sequence, including Scorpio's symbol. You couldn't just slot an O in there. I get that you're just doing this the one time, but if you want to be lazy about it, then just don't use the sequence at all. Just flash to Nitron. Ugh. Anyway, Predaraptor actually gets the upper hand at first, placing Nitron into the same, helpless on its back position as we have seen everyone else in this episode. However, remember that Nitron can summon its sword a la Mjolnir, so it blasts Predaraptor back, then firing misangled blast at its neck. Winner, winner, raptor dinner. Lechner says that this monster is dead, but Gorganis says no, it can be rebuilt, we have the technology, etc., etc. Which completely counteracts the whole we're fighting this thing again vibe of this episode, so that critique sticks after all. They portal back, and Nimbar congratulates them all. Rick tells Nimbar that this was a one-time thing, he still doesn't care about any of this, but Nimbar knows that he does, and says Orion will always be one of his Sentinels. Rick says that he's still leaving, but hey, Nimbar has his number, tattoo. Drew asks him not to go, not that she cares, but she does. He says he is going to go, but she's still welcome to come with him, and they do that mind melt thing again. She wants to stay with her friends, though, saying that they need her to stay so they don't get too doofy. She says he can always look her up when he's back around Earth and extends a hand to him. And he pulls her in for a kiss. Okay, this isn't nearly as bad as when that jerk kissed Lori out of the blue, but seriously, stop kissing people without their permission. Nimbar says that he can put Rick on a freighter somewhere via a portal, and he leaves. The episode ends kind of awkwardly with everyone just standing around quietly. Read the signs? Episode 16, The Universal Hitchhiker. Pros, great changing of the formula with a unique element, darkness in Rick's backstory, and distrust of the mentor. Cons, a touch overwrought, laziness with the new element, and script quirks. This was a bold step for this show. They didn't pull it off 100%, but I respect the effort. The Universal Hitchhiker gets 4 signs out of 5. It's not often in shows like these that you see a new hero just randomly show up. We've been seeing it a little bit more in Power Rangers lately, such as when Sheriff Skyfire helped the Ninja Steel Rangers, but admittedly that was from Sentai footage. It's bold to do a story that introduces a brand new hero, even briefly. It expands the world. This gives us more on there being other teams, other Sentinels. And this particular team is a failure on Nimbar's record, a world that he failed to protect from Gorganis. And that failure gives Rick a very dark, yet oddly familiar, backstory. I am going to touch on that closer to the end because I want to address it as a separate element. But that flashback was surprisingly well done for this show. Orion calling out in terrorized sadness for his teammates, fighting Predaraptor and failing. Sure, I teased him for the emo thing, but it is understandable. One of the memes, shall we say, about early Power Rangers that's gained traction as of recently is that Zordon was kind of a shady mentor. The accusations that Rick flung at Nimbar are ones that Zordon has faced, recruiting a young team of almost children to be his soldiers and fight his battles, withholding information from them, being shady and secretive, etc. Nimbar gained a little bit of depth as a character from this, though in this specific instance he was being just a little coy about what he meant and probably would have told the team what he was talking about with Predaraptor if they had asked him. During the scene with Rick and Drew at her house, the episode veered just a little too much into soap opera territory. Rick, the mysterious, dark, brooding stranger. Drew, swooning over his oddly charming nature, him urging her to forget her good sense and run away with him Bonnie and Clyde style. It was still pretty good, but they could have dialed it back just a little. We get a brand new Sentinel with a different suit, and it's clearly just a spray-painted version of Taurus's suit. The new Sentinel can replace Scorpio in Nitron, yet they still use Scorpio's symbol in the formation sequence. They just didn't quite go far enough in making Orion a unique Sentinel. Even his weapon, which I didn't mention until now, kind of just looks like a prop hand axe they had lying around. And I kind of mentioned this first one already, but Drew gets upset at Nimbar for withholding information, when at worst Nimbar was just being a little coy. Gordon calls Rick out for being a loser that got his teammates killed when he had no opportunities to learn Rick's backstory. This was another script that just felt kind of rushed and unedited, sorry to say. But alright, let's address the Andrasian in the room. We have a silver extra hero who suddenly shows up, the last survivor of a destroyed world, and his name is Orion. Sound familiar to anyone? Yes, this is more than just a parallel. Orion from Super Megaforce seems to have had his backstory pulled directly from this episode. There are just too many coincidences.
Coincidence? I think not!
If it was just that they both wore silver, obviously not even a thing. If they both happen to be named Orion, okay, that's fine. But you add in the last survivor backstory thing, all three of those notes together? Yes, they're not 100% similar. Orion from Super Megaforce has more of a survivor's guilt story, while Rick has the whole trust nobody but yourself situation. But it is just too similar to be a coincidence, and it's just weird to think that Power Rangers copied this show. So we recently found out that Power Rangers Beast Morphers will be returning for its second season on Saturday, February 22nd, meaning the last For Now TTAF review will be airing sometime around February 19th. That's only going to get me to episode 18, so I better start working with Kaizoku and Chomsky on a new plan. But in the meantime, I better stay nose to the grindstone. Let's take a peek at the 17th episode of TTAF FBH, The Y-Files. Dude! 2 government agents arrive in Beverly Hills, considering it ground zero of a number of extraterrestrial sightings. Why am I suddenly hearing this weird whistling in my head? Anyway, that's going to do it for another Tattooed Teenage Alien Fighters from Beverly Hills episode review. Thank you, heroes, so much, as always, for watching. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, notifications, Patreon, and coffee. And until next time, may the power protect you. But quickly, heroes, before we get started, I'd appreciate it. And then when it in the just kidding, on the lucky. It's kind of been a thing in Power Rangers as of late with, some error just popped up on my computer and I don't know why. But all three of those together, Super